Lillian Harper had been working at CarverTech, a software company specializing in data analysis tools, for over 12 years. Starting as a secretary, she had climbed her way up to the position of senior project manager, a role she earned through relentless dedication and countless hours of unpaid overtime. Her boss, Donovan Reed, the company's CEO, was a man known for his charm and his ruthlessness. Donovan was the kind of man who could make you feel like you were the most important person in the room until you weren't useful to him anymore. Lillian had been the driving force behind a new project, InsightVue, a powerful data visualization tool that had the potential to revolutionize the market. It was her brainchild, her sleepless nights, her sweat and tears. She had built the team, designed the framework, and pitched it to Donovan. He had been skeptical at first, but once the product started gaining traction, he was all in. Within 18 months, InsightVue became the company's top-selling product, catapulting CarverTech's valuation past the $10 million mark. Lillian was thrilled. She was finally in the position to negotiate for a senior executive role, something she had always dreamed of. But as the company hit that $10 million milestone, Donovan called her into his office. He was smiling that disarming, toothy smile as he gestured for her to sit. "You did an incredible job, Lillian," he said, clasping his hands together. "But I think we need a change in leadership. The board agrees. We're bringing in someone with more senior experience to lead the next phase of InsightVue." Lillian's heart dropped. Are you firing me?" Donovan leaned back in his chair, his expression a mask of feigned sympathy. "It's not personal. It's business." And just like that, Lillian was escorted out of the building, her belongings shoved into a cardboard box. Everything she had built, the project she had conceived, the team she had nurtured, was no longer hers. She was left standing in the parking lot, stunned, betrayed, and absolutely livid. But Donovan had no idea that in his haste to cut her off, he had made a grave mistake. Lillian had a contingency plan. And what Donovan thought was his biggest victory would soon become his worst nightmare. Lillian sat in her tiny, dimly lit apartment, staring at the box of belongings that had been unceremoniously dumped into her arms on her way out of CarverTech. The room was filled with a silence so heavy it pressed down on her, suffocating. The betrayal gnawed at her, a relentless ache she couldn't shake. 12 years of loyalty, innovation, and sacrifice had been wiped away in a single afternoon. She reached for her phone, her hands shaking as she scrolled through her contacts. Her mind raced back to moments with her team, the late-night brainstorming sessions, the shared takeout dinners, the triumphant high-fives when they finally cracked the code that would become InsightVue. Those people were her allies, her friends. But were they still on her side? Lillian dialed the number of Max Connolly, the lead developer she had personally recruited for the project. Max was brilliant but cynical, the type who distrusted authority and never hesitated to speak his mind. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Lillian?" His voice was tense, wary. "I heard what happened." "Did you?" Lillian swallowed, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Yeah. Donovan's already parading his new guy around the office. Some hotshot from New York. Claims he's going to take InsightVue to the next level." Lillian clenched her jaw. "Max, listen to me. InsightVue is my project. I built it from the ground up. Donovan stole it." "I know," Max said, his voice low. "And I know something else. The source code, your code, is still in the backup server. Donovan thinks he owns it now, but he's wrong." Lillian's heart thudded in her chest. Max had just handed her a weapon, a digital key to the kingdom she had created. But it wasn't enough. She needed more. "What about the team? Where do they stand?" Max hesitated. "They're scared, Lillian. Donovan's been feeding them stories about you, that you were embezzling company funds, sabotaging the project. It's all lies, but you know how he is. He's got them second-guessing everything." Lillian's hands trembled as she hung up the phone. Donovan wasn't just stealing her project, he was destroying her reputation. It was a preemptive strike, a way to isolate her from the people she once trusted. But Lillian wasn't going to let him get away with it. Donovan had underestimated her, dismissed her as nothing more than a cog in his machine. But Lillian was more than that. She was the architect of InsightVue, and she was about to turn the entire system against him. Lillian paced her living room, the glow of her laptop casting eerie shadows across the walls. The source code. If she could access it, she could prove that InsightVue was hers. But it wasn't just about the code. Donovan was a master manipulator, a man who had always been 3 steps ahead. To outmaneuver him, she needed more than digital leverage. She needed eyes and ears inside CarverTech. The next morning, Lillian met Max at a small, nondescript coffee shop downtown. Max looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, fingers tapping nervously against his coffee cup. "Donovan's really going for blood," Max muttered, glancing around as though expecting Donovan to materialize out of thin air. "He's telling everyone you were embezzling funds from the InsightVue budget, claims he found evidence of missing payments." Lillian's jaw clenched. "What kind of evidence?" "Bogus invoices," Max said. "They look legit, but they're all dated after you were fired. He's framing you, Lillian." The room seemed to tilt, and Lillian gripped the edge of the table. Donovan wasn't just destroying her career, he was setting her up for criminal charges. "Max, I need access to that backup server," Lillian said, her voice tight. "The original source code has timestamps that prove it was my work, not Donovan's. If I can get that data, I can expose him." Max leaned forward, lowering his voice. "It's not that simple. Donovan's new guy, Ethan Keller, he's already restructured the server. Access is restricted, but there might be another way." Lillian's eyes narrowed. "What way?" "Ethan's holding a team meeting tomorrow. He's going to present a new version of InsightVue, one that's still mostly your work, but with some minor tweaks to make it look like his. If you can get inside and record that meeting, we'll have proof that he's using your code without attribution." "How do I get in?" "They'll never let me through the front door." Max slid a plastic keycard across the table. "It's a temp access card. It'll get you into the building, but only for tomorrow." Lillian stared at the card, its glossy surface catching the light. This was it, her one shot. But if she got caught, she'd be facing more than just a ruined reputation. She'd be facing criminal charges. As she pocketed the card, Lillian's mind spun with plans, and backup plans for those plans. Donovan thought he had crushed her. He had no idea how wrong he was. Lillian stood outside CarverTech's glass-walled entrance, her fingers trembling as she slipped the temp access card into the reader. A green light blinked, and the door clicked open. She exhaled, releasing a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Inside, the office was quieter than she remembered. The fluorescent lights hummed softly, and the usual bustle of developers and designers was replaced by hushed conversations and suspicious glances. It was as if Donovan had placed the entire building under his spell. Lillian kept her head down, her hair tucked beneath a baseball cap. The conference room was on the 2nd floor, directly adjacent to the server room. She had memorized the building's layout 100 times over, but now, every corner felt like a potential ambush. As she climbed the stairs, she caught a glimpse of Ethan Keller through the glass walls. He stood at the front of the room, pacing with exaggerated confidence, a smug smile stretching across his face. Her blood boiled as she watched him pull up the first slide of the presentation, a sleek, polished version of InsightVue with all of her original features intact. Ethan was presenting her work, word for word, line by line. Even the user interface was nearly identical, and the room full of executives was nodding in approval, hanging onto his every word as if he were the visionary. Lillian gritted her teeth and slipped past the conference room, heading toward the server room. The door was locked as expected, but Max had assured her that the access card would work. She slid the card into the reader, and after a tense pause, the light turned green. Inside, the room was frigid, the air thick with the mechanical hum of servers stacked floor to ceiling. Lillian moved quickly, navigating to the specific server Max had mentioned. She plugged in a USB drive, her heart pounding as she scanned through the directory. There it was, the original source code for InsightVue, complete with timestamps that proved she was the sole creator. A shadow fell across the doorway. "Lillian?" She spun around, her heart plummeting. It was Ethan, his face twisted with shock, then a slow, sinister grin. "Well, well. Breaking and entering, huh? Donovan will love to hear about this." Lillian's eyes darted to the USB drive. The transfer was only 45% complete. "You're stealing my work," she shot back, her voice firm. "InsightVue was mine, and you know it." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with smug satisfaction. "Was yours. Now it's mine. And when Donovan finds out you're here, it's going to look a lot like you're trying to sabotage the project. You know, just like he said you would." Lillian swallowed, her pulse racing. Ethan wasn't just a pawn, he was a willing accomplice. And if he called Donovan right now, her entire plan would crumble. The transfer hit 75%. "Ethan," Lillian said, forcing herself to sound calm. "Think about it. Donovan's using you. The moment you're no longer useful, he'll drop you just like he did to me. You think you're untouchable? Think again." Ethan's jaw twitched, a flicker of doubt flashing across his face. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. The transfer hit 100%. Lillian yanked the USB drive free, shoving it into her pocket. "If you want to play Donovan's game, be my guest. But just remember, you're not the first person he's screwed over, and you won't be the last." She brushed past Ethan, her heart thundering as she raced toward the exit. She had what she needed. But as she exited the building, she couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan wasn't done with her yet. Back in her apartment, Lillian plugged the USB drive into her laptop, the screen glowing with the familiar lines of code she had poured her life into. There it was, the original InsightVue code, untouched, complete with the timestamps that predated Donovan's supposed improvements. But the relief was short-lived. A sudden knock at the door jolted her, and she quickly yanked the USB drive out, shoving it into her back pocket. "Who is it?" she called, her voice steady, betraying nothing. "It's me!" Max's muffled voice came through. "Let me in." Lillian opened the door, and Max slipped inside, glancing nervously down the hallway before closing it. His face was ashen, eyes darting around the room. "Lillian," he said, breathless, "something's happened." Her heart sank. "What is it?" "Ethan," Max said, running a hand through his hair. "He told Donovan you were there. He saw you in the server room." Lillian's stomach lurched. What did Donovan do? "Not much," Max said, biting his lip. "Yet, but he's playing it smart. He's told HR that someone hacked into the server room, accessed confidential files, and made a copy of InsightVue's source code. He hasn't named you outright, but he's setting the stage." Lillian swallowed, her mind racing. Donovan was tightening the noose. If he could prove she was there, he'd have her on theft charges, and he'd discredit any evidence she had against him. "But there's more," Max said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I overheard Ethan and Donovan talking. Ethan's not as loyal as he's pretending to be. He asked Donovan for a share of the profits from InsightVue, a big share. Donovan brushed him off, told him to keep his mouth shut and do what he's told." Lillian's jaw tightened. Ethan's feeling the squeeze. He wants more than Donovan's willing to give. Max nodded. "And Donovan threatened him. Told him that if he ever tried to cross him, he'd make sure Ethan went down for the hack. He said it just loud enough for everyone in the room to hear." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Lillian's face. Donovan was overconfident. He thought he had everyone under his control, but he was overplaying his hand. If Ethan felt betrayed, he could be turned. "Max," Lillian said, her mind working fast, "I need you to get a message to Ethan. Tell him I have evidence, real evidence, that can take Donovan down. But he has to meet me alone, somewhere neutral." Max's eyes widened. "You sure that's a good idea? What if he goes straight to Donovan?" Lillian met his gaze, her eyes steely. "He won't. Not if he thinks he can leverage it for himself. Donovan is playing with fire. It's time we turned up the heat." Max swallowed hard, nodding. "Okay, I'll get the message to him." As Max left, Lillian sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. The game was changing. Ethan was no longer just Donovan's lackey. He was a liability. And if she played this right, he might just be her ticket to bringing Donovan down. But one wrong move, and she'd lose everything, including her freedom. Lillian paced the length of her small apartment, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. It had been 3 hours since Max delivered the message to Ethan. 3 hours of silence. Each tick of the wall clock felt like a hammer to her nerves. Was Ethan going to show up? Would he betray her to Donovan instead? The silence shattered with a single vibration. A text message. Lillian's hands shook as she opened it. Coffee house, 9 p.m. Alone. The message was unsigned, but she knew it was from Ethan. Lillian grabbed her coat and slipped the USB drive into her pocket, her mind racing with 100 possible scenarios, most of them bad. The coffee house was a small, dimly lit cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place that hadn't changed in decades. The stale scent of coffee grounds and old wood hung heavy in the air as Lillian stepped inside. Ethan was already there, sitting in a back booth, his face half hidden by shadows. Lillian slid into the seat across from him. He didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on his coffee cup. "You came," Lillian said, keeping her voice low. Ethan's jaw clenched. "I shouldn't be here." "But you are," Lillian pressed. "Which means you're starting to realize Donovan's not going to keep his promises." Ethan finally met her gaze, his eyes dark and hollow. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know that Donovan promised you a cut of InsightVue," Lillian said, leaning forward. "And I know that he's not going to give it to you. You're disposable, Ethan. The second you stop being useful, he'll throw you under the bus, just like he did to me." Ethan's knuckles whitened around the coffee cup. "You don't understand. Donovan's got leverage on me. He's got—" "What? Evidence? Proof you were involved in setting me up?" "Of course he does," Lillian said. "But I have proof too." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What kind of proof?" Lillian reached into her pocket and pulled out the USB drive, sliding it across the table. "The original source code for InsightVue. It's all there. My work, my timestamps, everything. Donovan stole it, and you helped him. But if we work together, we can take him down." Ethan's hand hovered over the USB drive, his jaw working as he processed her words. "And then what? Donovan goes down, and I go down with him?" "Not if you play it smart," Lillian said, her voice sharp. "If you testify against him, you become a whistleblower. You expose what he did, and I help you clean up your part. We both get out clean. But if you keep covering for him, you're going to take the fall. Donovan's already setting you up." Ethan leaned back, his expression unreadable. "You really think you can take him down?" "I know I can," Lillian said, her voice as cold as steel. "But I can't do it alone." A long silence stretched between them. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. Ethan finally nodded, a single, almost imperceptible gesture. "Fine," he said. "But you better be right about this, because if Donovan finds out I'm talking to you, I'm dead." Lillian stood up, her heart pounding. "Then let's make sure he never finds out." She walked out into the night, her mind churning with plans and contingencies. Ethan was on her side, for now. But trust was a fragile thing, and in this game, a single misstep could be fatal. Lillian sat in her darkened apartment, a single lamp casting a dim glow over the cluttered coffee table littered with papers, USB drives, and her laptop. The air was thick with tension as she tapped her fingers against her knee, her mind racing. Ethan had agreed to help, but his fear of Donovan was palpable. If she pushed too hard, he could turn on her. If she didn't push hard enough, Donovan would crush them both. A soft knock echoed through the room. Lillian tensed, her eyes darting to the door. 3 knocks, their agreed signal. She opened it cautiously, and Ethan slipped inside, his face drawn and pale. "You weren't followed?" Lillian asked. Ethan shook his head, shoving his hands into his pockets. "No, Donovan's been glued to his office all day, yelling at everyone. I think the board's starting to ask questions." Lillian's eyebrows lifted. "Questions about what?" "About why InsightVue still isn't launching," Ethan said, sinking onto the couch. "He keeps telling them the project is delayed because of security issues. But really, he's stalling. He's trying to find a way to pin the server room breach on you. And now, on me." Lillian's jaw clenched. What did he say? "He's got a backup plan," Ethan muttered, his gaze fixed on the floor. "He's planning to find evidence that you and I were working together to sabotage InsightVue. He's having some of the files altered to look like we were embezzling funds." Lillian's mind raced. "He's manufacturing evidence?" Ethan nodded. And he's not stopping there. He's got a new investor meeting lined up for next week. Big money, the kind of investors who will bury the story and protect him if he can convince them InsightVue is a legitimate project. Lillian stood abruptly, pacing the room. Then we need to act fast. If he secures new funding, he'll bury us both. We need real evidence, something that can't be refuted. Ethan swallowed, his eyes wary. There is one thing. Donovan records all of his investor pitches. He keeps them on a secure drive in his office. If we can get our hands on one of those recordings, we might catch him admitting that he stole InsightVue, or even better, admitting that he's setting us up. Lillian stopped pacing, her pulse quickening. And how do we get that recording? Ethan hesitated, glancing toward the window as if expecting Donovan to materialize. Donovan keeps his office locked up tight, but he uses a fingerprint scanner. Lillian's mind spun, formulating a plan. Max might be able to help with that. He knows the security protocols, but we can't make a move until we know when the investor meeting is. We need to time this perfectly. Ethan nodded, but his face was still pale, his eyes haunted. Lillian, if this goes wrong— It won't, Lillian said firmly, forcing herself to believe it. This is our only chance to take Donovan down. We either expose him now, or we both go down for crimes we didn't commit. Ethan nodded, his jaw tightening. Then let's do it. As he slipped back out into the night, Lillian watched him go, her chest tight. Ethan was on her side, for now. But if Donovan sensed even a hint of betrayal, he would destroy them both without hesitation. And as Lillian locked the door behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The investor meeting was a ticking time bomb, and if they didn't act fast, Donovan would win. Lillian sat across from Max in the back booth of a dingy bar, the kind of place where secrets were kept under the haze of cheap whiskey and stale cigarette smoke. Max leaned forward, his face etched with worry. "A fingerprint scanner?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Donovan's really stepped up his game. Lillian nodded, her jaw tight. He's paranoid, and for good reason. He's got a recording of his investor pitch locked up in his office. If we can get our hands on it, we can expose everything— the theft, the lies, the setup. Max shook his head, running a hand through his disheveled hair. That office is a fortress. Cameras everywhere. And the scanner? There's no way in without Donovan's print. Lillian leaned in closer. Unless we make a copy. Max's eyes widened. You want to lift his fingerprint? Not want to, Lillian said. Have to. Max exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. Okay, we need to get close enough to him to lift a print. But how? He's on high alert. The investor meeting is tomorrow afternoon, and he's not leaving the office until then. Lillian's mind raced. What about the meeting itself? There'll be drinks, food, lots of opportunities to get a print. Max nodded slowly. Okay, but how do we get in? We can't just stroll into a closed-door investor pitch. Lillian glanced over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the room for Ethan. That's where he comes in. Moments later, Ethan slipped into the booth, his face drawn and tense. Donovan's in full-on power mode, he said without preamble. He's got security everywhere. Anyone who even looks at that office wrong is getting their badge checked. We need to get close to him, Lillian said. Tomorrow, during the investor meeting. Ethan's jaw clenched. You're asking me to walk right into the lion's den. You're already in the lion's den, Lillian snapped. If Donovan signs that investor deal, we're both finished. He'll have enough money to bury the evidence and us along with it. Ethan swallowed, glancing at Max, then back at Lillian. What do you need me to do? Get Donovan to touch something. A glass, a pen, anything that can hold a print, Max said. Then get it to me. I'll handle the rest. Ethan nodded, his gaze dark and haunted. Okay, but you need to be ready. If Donovan even suspects— He won't, Lillian said, her eyes hard as steel. We get that print, we get into his office, and we get the recording. Once we have it, Donovan's entire scheme comes crashing down. Max leaned back, his expression grim. And if we get caught? Lillian looked at them both, her jaw set. Then we're going down for things we didn't do. But if we do nothing, Donovan wins, and he'll make sure we never get another chance to fight back. Ethan stood abruptly, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I'll see you tomorrow," he muttered before disappearing into the night. Max watched him go, his fingers drumming nervously against the table. "You trust him?" Lillian's eyes stayed fixed on the door Ethan had just walked through. "I don't have a choice." Lillian's hands shook as she inserted the USB drive into Donovan's office computer. The room was deathly silent, save for the faint hum of the computer as it powered up. Sweat beaded at her temples as she waited for the drive to register. Seconds felt like hours. The stakes had never been higher. On the screen, the drive icon blinked to life. Lillian double-clicked, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The file directory opened, revealing dozens of encrypted folders. Her eyes scanned the list, her heart hammering. investor_pitch_confidential.mp4. There it was. She dragged the file onto the USB drive, glancing nervously at the door. Outside, the muffled voices of the investors echoed through the corridor. Donovan was in full sales mode, his voice smooth and confident, spinning lies that Lillian was about to unravel. The progress bar inched forward. 10%, 25%, 45%. A soft beep echoed through the room, and Lillian's blood ran cold. The door handle jiggled. "Lillian!" It was Ethan's voice, tight and urgent. "Are you almost done?" "Almost," Lillian whispered, her eyes fixed on the screen. 65%, 80%. The door creaked open, and Ethan slipped inside, his face ashen. "Donovan's wrapping up. We're out of time." Lillian's pulse quickened. Just a few more seconds. Ethan moved to the window, peering out through the blinds. "He's saying goodbye to the investors. We need to move now." 95%, 100%. The transfer complete, Lillian yanked the USB drive free and shoved it into her pocket. "Let's go!" They slipped out of the office, but as they rounded the corner, Donovan's booming voice echoed from the hallway. "Lillian!" She froze, her heart seizing in her chest. Donovan's eyes locked onto hers, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Beside him stood two security guards, arms crossed over their chests. "What are you doing here?" Donovan's voice was deceptively calm, his eyes dark with suspicion. Lillian forced a smile, her mind racing. "Just saying goodbye to some old colleagues. Couldn't resist seeing the place one last time." Donovan's gaze flicked to Ethan, who stood rigid, eyes fixed on the floor. "Is that so?" Lillian's fingers tightened around the USB drive in her pocket. "Yep, but I should be going." Before Donovan could respond, Lillian bolted. Ethan hesitated for a split second, then followed her. Behind them, Donovan's voice rang out. "Stop them!" They tore down the hallway, security guards thundering after them. Lillian's breath burned in her lungs as she sprinted toward the exit. Ethan was right behind her, panic etched across his face. "Out the back!" Lillian shouted, skidding around the corner. The emergency exit loomed ahead, a red exit sign flickering ominously. They burst through the door into the alleyway. Rain poured down, the cold drops stinging Lillian's skin. Ethan doubled over, gasping for breath. "Did you get it?" Lillian pulled the USB drive from her pocket, holding it up. "I got it!" Ethan sagged against the wall, relief flooding his features. "Now what?" "Now," Lillian said, her eyes darkening. "We take this to the board, and we bury Donovan."